The refugee camp at Emperor's Deliverance should have been safe. Over 12,000 souls huddled behind makeshift walls, clutching their Emperor's mercy close as darkness fell over the ashen wasteland of Armageddon. Mothers whispered prayers, children whimpered in the cold. Imperial Guard sentries peered nervously into the smoke-choked night, knowing what approached from the burning ruins of Hades' hive. The Orks came at dawn, over 5,000 of them. A green tide of roaring violence that swept over the outer defenses like a tsunami of rage and rust. The defenders fought bravely, but hopelessly. Within minutes, the first refugees began to scream. That's when the sky lit up with fire. Captain Vinyar of the Marines Malevolent watched from his command post through unblinking optics. He saw the Orks surge through the camp's perimeter. He saw the refugees trapped between the enemy and nowhere. He saw the perfect kill zone, and without hesitation, he gave the order that would define his chapter's reputation for millennia.
Launch.
The whirlwind artillery batteries opened fire. Explosive rounds shrieked through the air and detonated among the Orks. And among the refugees. Shrapnel tore through green flesh and human flesh with equal indifference. The Marines Malevolent moved forward as the barrage pinned the enemy in place, their sunburst yellow armor splattered with ash and blood as they methodically carved through pockets of trapped greenskins. 6 hours later, every Ork was dead. So were nearly 4,000 of the refugees they'd been sent to protect. When Salamander's chapter master Tushan arrived at the aftermath and confronted Captain Vinyar, the Marine Malevolent's response was simple and chilling in its clarity.
The Emperor's enemies are dead. The mission is complete.
This is the Marines Malevolent, where other chapters see innocents to be saved. They see acceptable losses. Where others see collateral damage, they see efficiency. Where others see brothers, they see only the mission. In a galaxy where even the Adeptus Astartes pride themselves on honor and nobility, the Marines Malevolent stand apart, despised by their own kind. They are the Emperor's most brutal servants, the weapon used when victory matters more than the cost, the chapter whose very name has become synonymous with carnage. This is their story. Mystery cloaks the founding of the Marines Malevolent like the smoke of a burning world. Imperial records place their creation sometime in the 32nd millennium. But beyond that bare fact, the details dissolve into contradictions and redacted files. They claim no Primarch. They acknowledge no parent chapter. Their gene seed's origin remains classified or perhaps simply unknown. This deliberate obscurity raises dark questions. Were they founded from unstable gene stock, their heritage buried to avoid shame? Were they created during the cursed founding, that ill-fated 21st founding where genetic experimentation created more monsters than heroes? Or is their lineage known but deliberately concealed? Perhaps descended from a first founding legion whose legacy they've utterly dishonored. Some whisper they carry the gene seed of the Iron Hands, which would explain their callous disregard for weakness and their view of flesh as expendable. Others point to tactical similarities with the Imperial Fists, suggesting a bitter offshoot that abandoned Dorn's nobility while keeping his siege warfare expertise. A few bold scholars have even suggested tainted Ultramarine stock, though such claims invite immediate censure from the Inquisition. The Marines Malevolent themselves offer no clarification. When questioned about their heritage, they respond with hostile silence or barely veiled contempt. They possess no homeworld, no fortress monastery whose halls might contain records of their founding. They are fleet-based, eternally mobile, their strike cruiser Purgatory and sister vessels wandering the void like wolves without a pack. What is known with certainty is this. By the time Imperial records first clearly document the Marines Malevolent's existence, they were already notorious, already despised, already exactly what they are now.
Innocence does not exist, only degrees of guilt. Freedom must be earned, it must be fought for. Cowards, the weak and the impure do not deserve to live.
Captain Vinyar, Third War for Armageddon. To understand the Marines Malevolent is to comprehend a philosophy that makes even hardened Imperial commanders uncomfortable. Their worldview is built on several core tenets that guide every decision, every battle, every life they take or fail to save. The Marines Malevolent believe innocence is a lie. In their eyes, every human in the Imperium exists on a spectrum of guilt. The soldier who fights shares less guilt than the civilian who merely survives. The refugee who flees shares more guilt than the defender who dies. Those who will not fight for themselves do not deserve the blood of others spilled in their defense. This cruel calculus means civilian casualties aren't unfortunate accidents but logical outcomes. When Captain Vinyar shelled Emperor's Deliverance refugee camp, he wasn't making a hard choice. He was eliminating an Ork threat using the most efficient method available. That nearly 4,000 refugees died in the process was, in his judgment, their own failure. They should have fought. They should have armed themselves. They should have been strong enough to matter. This philosophy extends beyond mere tactics. It infects how the Marines Malevolent interact with everyone. They show no special deference to Imperial nobility. They extend no courtesy to the administratum officials. Even fellow Astartes are viewed through the lens of worth determined by strength. The Salamander's compassion is weakness. The Ultramarines' diplomacy is cowardice. Only those who prove themselves in the fires of war earn even grudging respect.
Hate compels us, it drives us, keener than any sword, more enduring than any starship or fort, colder than Fenrisian ice.
Captain Castor, Vilifier's Company. Where most chapters speak of duty, honor, or faith as their guiding principles, the Marines Malevolent embrace hate, not the hot, chaotic fury of Khorne's servants, but cold, calculating hatred refined into a weapon. They hate the Xenos for existing. They hate heretics for their weakness. They hate traitors for their cowardice. And perhaps most disturbing, they seem to hate humanity itself for needing protection. The hatred manifests in their infamous battle cry, "Hate is the surest weapon." Where other chapters might invoke the Emperor's name or their Primarch's legacy, the Marines Malevolent invoke only their own cold fury. It's honest in a way that makes other Astartes deeply uncomfortable. Most Space Marines channel their aggression through noble purpose. The Marines Malevolent simply let it burn. The Marines Malevolent judge all actions by a single metric. Does it achieve victory? Honor is meaningless if the enemy survives. Mercy is pointless if the mission fails. Civilian lives are worthless if their deaths purchase success. This absolute pragmatism makes them terrifyingly effective and equally despised. They will bombard cities knowing Imperial citizens shelter within. They will deny medical aid to wounded allies if it diverts resources from the front. They will execute prisoners who might provide intelligence if keeping them alive poses any tactical risk. And they will do all of this without hesitation, remorse, or explanation. The darkest implication of this philosophy is that it may extend to their own brothers. There are unconfirmed reports of Marines Malevolent abandoning wounded battle brothers when extraction would compromise their position, of choosing victory over rescue, of viewing even their own lives as expendable resources to be used efficiently. If true, this would mark them as perhaps the only chapter in the Imperium willing to weaponize their own suffering in pursuit of the mission. The conflict aboard the Adeptus Mechanicus Ford ship Archimedes Rex reveals everything wrong with the Marines Malevolent in a single, bitter encounter. It began as a simple salvage operation. The ancient Ford ship drifted dead in the void. Its Mechanicus crew lost to some catastrophe. Its holds full of precious weapons and armor that should have been returned to Mars as ancient treaties demanded. The Salamanders arrived first, seeking survivors in keeping with their chapter's compassionate nature. What they found instead were the Marines Malevolent, led by veteran Sergeant Lorcar and Tech Marine Harkane, methodically looting the ship's armories in direct violation of the Mechanicus Pact. The confrontation that followed nearly sparked open war between chapters. Captain Vinyar of the Marines Malevolent defended his brother's actions with brutal logic. The Archimedes Rex was lost. The Mechanicus couldn't use its contents. The Marines Malevolent needed them desperately. What did it matter if ancient treaties were violated when the alternative was fighting the Emperor's wars with inadequate equipment? Only the threat of the Salamander strike cruiser Vulcan's Wrath forced the Marines Malevolent to retreat, but the insult wasn't forgotten. When Vulcan's Wrath later crash-landed on the Death World Scoria after a brutal engagement, Captain Vinyar arrived with rescue forces, not out of brotherhood, not out of honor, but to extract payment for the salvage rights he'd been denied. He demanded the salvaged weapons in exchange for rescue. Captain Nikeln of the Salamander's 3rd Company, surrounded by wounded brothers and facing death on a hostile world, had no choice but to agree. The Marines Malevolent saved them, then took the ancient weapons and power armor they'd been promised. Technically, they'd fulfilled their duty. Practically, they'd extorted dying brothers for material gain. When Tushan, chapter master of the Salamanders, learned what had transpired, he summoned Captain Vinyar to Nocturne. The confrontation between these two leaders illuminates the vast philosophical gulf between their chapters. Tushan saw betrayal, dishonor, and exploitation of brotherhood. Vinyar saw effective resource management and fair exchange. Neither could comprehend the other's position. Tushan honored the agreement Nikeln had made, but delivered a warning that resonates across centuries. Your arrogance will not be forgotten. It was less threat than prophecy. The Marines Malevolent had made an eternal enemy in the Salamanders, one of the Imperium's most respected and influential chapters. But they'd also acquired desperately needed equipment, which, in their calculation, made it worth it. The incident revealed another troubling truth. The Marines Malevolent were fighting with antiquated equipment. Sergeant Lorcar's entire squad wore Mark VI Corvus armor, ancient by the standards of the 41st millennium. Their bolters were obsolete patterns. They lacked the standard Mark VII Aquila armor most chapters fielded routinely. Whether this equipment shortage resulted from some past disaster, ongoing mechanicus displeasure, or simply inability to maintain supply lines remains unclear. But it suggested a chapter teetering on the edge of functionality, held together by will and hatred alone. Few campaigns in Imperial history match the scale and glory of Lord Commander Solar Macarius' conquest. From 392 to 399 M41, this legendary general pushed the Imperium's borders further than they'd reached since the Great Crusade itself. Nearly 1,000 worlds fell to his strategic genius, and marching alongside his armies deployed in their full chapter strength came the Marines Malevolent. They fought brilliantly and brutally, serving alongside the grim Star Phantoms chapter in some of the Crusade's deadliest engagements. Their tactics were as effective as they were ruthless. Entire populations were considered acceptable casualties if their sacrifice secured strategic objectives. The Marines Malevolent didn't just fight in the Macharian Crusade, they embodied its darkest excesses. Then, in 400 M41, Lord Commander Macarius died, and everything fell apart. The Macharian Heresy erupted as the dead general's subordinates turned on each other, fragmenting into warring factions. In the chaos that followed, the Marines Malevolent made a catastrophic miscalculation. They chose a side. Whether through ambition, ideology, or simple tactical assessment, they backed one of the warring generals. It was the wrong choice. The Star Phantoms, who'd fought alongside them throughout the Crusade, found themselves on the opposite side of the conflict. What follows was one of the most savage chapter-on-chapter conflicts in Imperial history. The Star Phantoms, already grim and merciless, showed the Marines Malevolent no quarter. The fighting was protracted, bloody, and utterly without mercy on either side. When the ash settled, the Marines Malevolent teetered on the brink of extinction. They'd been mauled, their numbers reduced to a fraction of their former strength. That they survived at all speaks to their ferocity and refusal to yield, even in the face of annihilation. But survival came at a terrible cost. The Inquisition investigated. The political wind shifted. Eventually, the Marines Malevolent were cleared of formal heresy charges. They'd backed the wrong faction, not betrayed the Imperium itself. But they were censured by the Holy Ordos, their reputation further stained, their already limited political capital spent. The Macharian Crusade should have been their glory. Instead, it became their near extinction. It also explains much about their later desperation. The Marines Malevolent who fought at Armageddon, who raided Archimedes Rex, who fought with outdated equipment were the scarred remnants of a chapter that had nearly died. They'd learned that in the Imperium's vast machinery, they stood alone. No one would save them. No one would reinforce them. If they needed something, they would take it. If victory required atrocity, they would commit it. Because survival was the only victory that mattered. When Warlord Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka returned to Armageddon in 998 M41 with the largest Ork Wa in millennia, the Imperium mobilized every available force to defend the critical hive world. Among the chapters that answered the call were the Marines Malevolent, deploying 2 full companies to the meat grinder of the Third War for Armageddon. They fought with characteristic brutal efficiency, pushing back greenskin tides through sheer aggression and calculated violence. But it was the fall of Hades' Hive that would define their role in the war and cement their infamy across the Imperium. Hades' Hive fell to the Orks in a tide of green fury. Hundreds of thousands of civilians managed to flee before the Hive's final collapse, streaming across the ash wastes towards refugee camps, hastily erected behind Imperial lines. Emperor's Deliverance was one such camp, a sprawling collection of tents and prefab shelters holding 30,000 souls who'd lost everything but their lives. The Orks followed. A massive war party drawn by the scent of fear and the promise of easy slaughter descended on the camp. The Imperial Guard defenders, already exhausted from retreat and undersupplied, prepared to sell their lives dearly. The civilians prayed, and Captain Vinyar watched, calculating trajectories and blast radii. He waited. This is crucial to understanding what followed. Vinyar deliberately held his whirlwind artillery battery silent as the Orks broke through the outer defenses. He watched as greenskins flooded into the camp, beginning their slaughter. He waited until the Orks were fully committed, intermingled with the refugees, packed into a perfect kill zone. Then, and only then, did he give the order to fire. The artillery barrage was devastating. Explosive rounds detonated among the Orks, shredding them with shrapnel and concussive force. They also detonated among the refugees. Men, women, children, Imperial Guardsmen who'd fought to defend them. The Marines' Malevolent artillery made no distinction. The shells kept falling, pinning the Orks in place through sheer volume of fire. Once the barrage had done its work, the Marines Malevolent advanced, moving through the hellscape they'd created. They methodically exterminated isolated pockets of Orks who'd survived the artillery. The battle lasted 6 solar hours. At its conclusion, the Ork war party was utterly destroyed. Not a single greenskin survived. Neither did nearly 4,000 refugees who perished in the crossfire. From Captain Vinyar's perspective, the operation was a complete success. Enemy eliminated. Objectives achieved. Resources efficiently deployed. The civilian casualties were regrettable only in that they represented a slight waste of potential labor or guard recruits. But they'd served their purpose as bait and as acceptable losses in the pursuit of total enemy destruction. From everyone else's perspective, it was a war crime. When Salamander's chapter master Tushan arrived at the smoldering ruins of the Emperor's Deliverance and learned what had transpired, his fury reportedly shook the very ground. The Salamanders, known throughout the Imperium for the compassion and dedication to protecting civilians, viewed the Marines' Malevolent's action as the basest betrayal of everything the Adeptus Astartes should stand for. This meeting between Tushan and Captain Vinyar became the stuff of legend. 2 Space Marine leaders, both utterly convinced of their righteousness, neither willing to concede an inch. What exactly was said remains classified or lost to rumor. Some accounts suggest heated words. Others claim cold, calculated threats. The most disturbing reports, never officially confirmed, suggest one participant struck the other. If true, this would represent an almost unthinkable breach of the brotherhood that's supposed to bind all Astartes together. What is certain is that Tushan brought the matter to the Inquisition. The Marines Malevolent were formally censured for their actions at Emperor's Deliverance, investigated, judged, and found technically within their operational parameters. They destroyed an enemy force. they'd used available resources. That those resources included civilian lives was unfortunate, but not, in the cold calculus of Imperial law, actually illegal. The censure was a political gesture, a way for the Inquisition to acknowledge that something deeply wrong had occurred without actually punishing the Marines Malevolent for doing exactly what they'd been created to do, win at any cost. But it further isolated the chapter. After Armageddon, most Imperial commanders would rather fight undermanned than accept Marines Malevolent support. The stain on their honor became permanent. Emperor's Deliverance wasn't the only incident that darkened the Marines Malevolent's reputation during the Third War. Captain Castor's elite vilifiers company led a mission deep into the ruins of Hades' hive itself, extracting Imperial officers who'd been captured by the Orks. The mission was technically successful. The officers were recovered, but the methods employed and the casualties accepted among the supporting Imperial forces led to yet more complaints. Captain Vinyar's propaganda broadcast became infamous during the campaign. His Vox transmissions mixed threats with philosophical justifications for the Marines' Malevolent's brutal methods. One broadcast in particular captured their mindset perfectly before being cut off mid-transmission, perhaps by embarrassed Imperial authorities.
Innocence does not exist, only degrees of guilt. Freedom must be earned, it must be fought for. Cowards, the weak and impure do not deserve to live. Hades was lost on the backs of the craven. Armageddon will only be won by the strong. We of the Marines Malevolent will stand before this menace, and we will.
The transmission ended there. Whether it was jammed, censored, or simply interrupted by combat remains unknown. But those words crystallize everything the Marines Malevolent believe and everything that makes other Imperial servants fear and despise them in equal measure. The tale of veteran Marine Ballack and Black Templar Sergeant Tiamed illustrates how the Marines Malevolent's philosophy corrupts even the sacred bonds between Space Marines. It begins as so many of their stories do, with cruelty masquerading as pragmatism. During operations on Armageddon, Ballack of the Vilifier's company crossed paths with Tiamed, a sword brethren sergeant of the Black Templars. Both had fought and killed a particularly dangerous Ork war boss. Both claimed the trophy, the beast's severed head. The dispute should have been settled with words or perhaps a formal duel of honor. Instead, Ballack challenged Tiamed to combat and emerged victorious. Rather than show respect to a fallen opponent, Ballack took everything. The Ork's head, Tiamed's armor, even his sword. He stripped a brother Marine of his war gear and left him humiliated. Tiamed's brother, Vorda, swore a blood oath of vengeance. The feud between these warriors would burn until one of them died. Fate brought them together again during Captain Castor's extraction mission in the ruins of Hades' hive. Marines Malevolent and Black Templars fought alongside each other through twisted corridors and ash-choked chambers, extracting captured Imperial officers from Ork activity. When the mission went wrong and the Marines became separated, Ballack and Vorda found themselves alone together. They fought, not against the Orks but against each other, the blood oath finally being settled. Before either could kill the other, the Orks found them, captured them, dragged them deeper into the hive's nightmarish depths to serve as entertainment in an underground fighting arena. Forced to duel for the amusement of jeering greenskins, the two Marines did something remarkable. They set aside their hatred. Working together, they deceived their captors, positioning themselves near fuel tanks that the Orks used to light their arena. When the moment came, they detonated the tanks in a massive explosion that killed hundreds of Orks and gave the Marines a chance at freedom. Both survived the blast. For a brief moment, standing together in the burning wreckage, covered in Ork blood and ash, they were brothers. Two warriors who'd overcome their hatred to achieve victory together. In any other chapter's tale, this would be where honor and respect transformed enemies into battle brothers. But Ballack was a Marine Malevolent. Vorda struck first, his blade punching through Ballack's armor and into his primary heart. The Black Templar had never forgotten, never forgiven. The blood oath remained unfulfilled until that moment. He left Ballack dying among the Ork corpses, finally avenging his sergeant's humiliation. The tragedies that both warriors were right by the respective chapters' values. Vorda honored his oath and avenged his brother. Ballack had fought with cold efficiency, taking what he could use and discarding honor as weakness. Their story is a microcosm of why the Marines Malevolent will forever stand apart from their brother chapters. They simply do not see the universe the way other Astartes do. Where others see sacred bonds, they see tactical advantages. Where others see honor, they see inefficiency. Where others see brothers, they see only tools. The opening of the Great Rift in M42 split the galaxy in two, creating the Imperium Nihilus, the dark half of the Imperium cut off from the Astronomican's light. In this nightmare realm where demons walked freely and hope died by inches, even the Marines Malevolent found themselves tested. The incident designated Duty Unto Death reveals how the Marines Malevolent operate in the post-Rift galaxy. A small Imperial fleet carrying precious Primaris Space Marine gene tech, guarded by Adeptus Custodes wardens, found itself beset by a pair of wayward Tyranid hive ships. The fleet stood no chance. The shield captain commanding the Custodians made the only choice available: emergency teleportation to the nearby death world of Loki II. For a full solar month, the Custodian wardens held their position in the volcanic highlands. Wave after wave of Tyranid organisms surged up through lava channels and toxic fume clouds. The Emperor's Golden Guardians repulsed every assault, building fortifications from the corpses of their enemies, never yielding an inch of ground. They fought as only Custodians can fight, each warrior worth 100 Space Marines, each standing firm in service of an oath that suspended even their own survival. When the Marines Malevolent finally arrived in orbit, they found a single Custodian warden still standing, grievously wounded, surrounded by a fortress of Tyranid corpses, still guarding the untouched Primaris gene tech. The sight should have inspired awe and respect. The Custodians had done the impossible, held against overwhelming odds through sheer determination and skill. The Marines Malevolent's response was characteristically pragmatic. They drove the hive ships away with overwhelming firepower. They recovered the gene tech. They extracted the surviving Custodian. Mission accomplished with typical brutal efficiency. But one wonders what thoughts passed through their minds as they surveyed that fortress of corpses. Did they feel admiration for the Custodian's dedication, or merely satisfaction at acquiring valuable genetic material? The incident demonstrates both the Marines Malevolent's continued operational effectiveness in the dark times following the Rift's opening, and their unchanged philosophy. They arrived, they fought, they took what they needed. The Custodian's month-long vigil was relevant only in that it preserved the gene tech until the Marines Malevolent could claim it. Among the Marines Malevolent's companies, the Vilifiers stand apart as the chapter's elite. Led by Captain Castor, a warrior who embodies the chapter's philosophies of hate as a weapon. The Vilifiers serve as the Marines Malevolent's tip of the spear. When the chapter needs a particularly brutal or ruthless operation executed, the Vilifiers deploy. Captain Castor's words encapsulate the Vilifiers' operational doctrine. They don't merely fight their enemies, they hate them with such pure, cold intensity that it becomes a supernatural force in itself. This calculated malevolence makes them devastatingly effective in combat, but utterly impossible to work alongside. Unlike most modern Space Marine chapters, the Marines Malevolent maintain restrictions on their librarians that echo the ancient Council of Nicaea. Their psychers serve the chapter but cannot hold positions of command or authority. This isn't born from fear or corruption, as one might expect, but from the chapter's fundamental philosophy that psychic power represents a form of weakness. In the Marines Malevolent's worldview, true strength comes from physical prowess, tactical acumen, and absolute conviction. Psychic abilities are a crutch, a shortcut that bypasses the hard work of actual warfare. That they maintain a librarium at all speaks to pragmatism overriding ideology. Psychers are too useful to completely discard, but they'll never be trusted with leadership. The Marines Malevolent's desperate pursuit of salvage from the Archimedes Rex wasn't mere greed, it was survival. The chapter fights with equipment that other chapters would relegate to museums. Mark VI Corvus armor that should have been replaced millennia ago, obsolete bolter patterns that lack the stopping power of modern weapons. Their tech marines work miracles keeping ancient war gear functional. but no amount of skill can completely compensate for equipment shortages. This raises troubling questions about the chapter's relationship with the Adeptus Mechanicus. Mars supplies all chapters with equipment and maintenance support as part of the ancient pacts dating back to the Horus Heresy. That the Marines Malevolent fight with such outdated gear suggests either the Mechanicus has deliberately reduced support, perhaps in response to the chapter's reputation, or some past offense, or the chapter suffered some catastrophic loss of materiel that they've never recovered from. Their fleet-based nature exacerbates these problems. Without a homeworld's manufactorums or a fortress monastery's armories, they depend entirely on what they can scavenge, trade for, or take by force. The strike cruiser Purgatory and her sister vessels serve as mobile bases, but they cannot replace the industrial infrastructure a proper chapter homeworld provides. The Marines Malevolent's heraldry speaks volumes about their identity. Their primary armor color is sunburst yellow, a bright, aggressive hue that makes them immediately identifiable on any battlefield. Unlike the noble blue of the Ultramarines or the blood red of the Blood Angels, yellow carries no particular symbolic weight in Imperial tradition. It's simply visible, aggressive, impossible to ignore. Black forms their secondary color, covering their power packs, chest guards, and other key armor sections. The combination creates a warning pattern, like the stripes of a dangerous insect. Stay away, approach at your own risk. We are not your brothers. Their chapter badge drives this message home, a black thunderbolt with a stylized wing protruding from its top, centered on a field of sunburst yellow. The thunderbolt represents sudden, devastating violence. The wing suggests speed and aggression. Together they form an emblem that promises swift, overwhelming destruction to anyone who stands in their way. Silver marks the Aquila or Imperialis on their chest guards, the only concession to traditional Imperial symbolism. Even this seems perfunctory, a minimal acknowledgement of the Emperor they claim to serve while making it clear their primary loyalty is to their own brutal code. The Marines Malevolent follow Codex Standard Company markings with helmet stripes indicating company number, but even this orthodox organization cannot disguise what they are. Other chapters might bear colors representing nobility, sacrifice, or ancient heritage. The Marines Malevolent wear warning colors. They want you to know what's coming. The Marines Malevolent's leadership reveals much about the chapter's character. Each named officer embodies different aspects of their cruel philosophy. Captain Vinyar of the 2nd Company stands as the chapter's most infamous commander. His actions at Emperor's Deliverance, the Archimedes Rex, and across Armageddon made him the face of everything wrong with the Marines Malevolent. Yet from another perspective, Vinyar is exactly what a Marine Malevolent should be, utterly focused on victory, willing to make any sacrifice, capable of viewing human lives as tactical resources. He doesn't justify his decisions with noble rhetoric. He simply achieves his objectives and moves on to the next battle. Captain Castor of the Vilifiers represents the chapter's ideological heart. His statement about hate as the ultimate weapon go beyond tactical doctrine into something almost philosophical. Castor has refined cruelty into an art form, understanding that the fear and revulsion his chapter inspires can be as devastating as their bolter fire. When the Vilifiers deploy, the enemy knows they face warriors who will show no mercy, take no prisoners, and accept no surrender. Captain Vor participated in operations cleansing the Fenris system of demonic taint, proving the Marines Malevolent can work alongside other chapters when absolutely necessary. That he managed this without creating another inter-chapter incident speaks to either political skill or the pressing nature of the demonic threat. Even the Space Wolves, who pride themselves on independence and fierce brotherhood, must have found working with Vor's Marines intensely uncomfortable. Veteran Sergeant Lorcar led the raid of the Archimedes Rex, demonstrating the Marines Malevolent's willingness to violate ancient treaties when it serves their needs. His entire squad fought with obsolete equipment, making their desperation for salvage understandable even if their methods remained indefensible. Tech Marine Harkane accompanied him, suggesting the chapter's technical specialists share the Line Marines' pragmatic ruthlessness. Sergeant Turok served under Vinyar during the Armageddon campaign, presumably participating or witnessing the Emperor's Deliverance massacre. That he continued serving without apparent protest speaks to the depth of indoctrination within the chapter. The Marines Malevolent don't just train their warriors to fight without mercy. They create believers who genuinely see civilian casualties as acceptable costs. What's conspicuously absent from Imperial records is any mention of the Marines Malevolent's chapter master or homeworld. Most chapters proudly proclaim their founding, their genetic heritage, their fortress monastery's location. The Marines Malevolent offer only silence. This suggests either shame about their origins or a calculated decision to obscure their history. Either possibility raises uncomfortable questions about what they're hiding. Why does the Imperium tolerate the Marines Malevolent? This question haunts every analysis of the chapter. They violate treaties with Mechanicus. They create diplomatic incidents with other chapters. They massacre civilians. They've been censured by the Inquisition multiple times, yet they remain officially loyalist, permitted to operate as a Space Marine chapter in good standing. The uncomfortable answer is this: the Imperium needs monsters. For all its rhetoric about honor and nobility, the Imperium of Man runs on brutality. Every day it sacrifices thousands of psychers to keep the Astronomicon lit. It condemns entire worlds to exterminatus when they fall to chaos. It feeds penal legions into meat grinders knowing they'll die to the last man. The Imperium is a vast machine that consumes lives to sustain itself. Most Space Marine chapters maintain the fiction that they're noble warriors protecting humanity. They follow codes of honor, they show mercy when possible, they distinguish between acceptable and unacceptable casualties. These lies are necessary. They let the Imperium maintain its self-image as the defender of mankind. The Marines Malevolent don't bother with fiction. They see the Imperium for what it truly is, a grinding war machine where survival matters more than virtue and victory justifies any atrocity. They're what all Astartes would become if you stripped away the honor, the nobility, the carefully maintained codes of conduct. They're the brutal truth beneath the golden lies. And sometimes the Imperium needs that truth. When a world must be taken regardless of cost, when the strategic objective outweighs all other considerations, when mercy would be weakness and compassion would be failure, in those moments the Imperium dispatches the Marines Malevolent and lets them do what must be done. Afterwards, there are investigations, censures, diplomatic incidents. But the mission is complete. The enemy is destroyed. The objective is secured. And if thousands of innocents die in the process, well, the Imperium has never particularly cared about individual lives, only survival of the whole. The Marines Malevolent serve another crucial function. They make other chapters look good by comparison. When the Ultramarines claim to fight with honor, they can point at the Marines Malevolent and say, "At least we're not like them." When the Salamanders defend civilians, the contrast with the Marines Malevolent makes their compassion shine brighter. The existence of a truly terrible chapter helps maintain the fiction that others are noble. There's also the practical reality that the Imperium cannot afford to lose any loyal Space Marine chapters. Every loyalist Astartes is precious in a galaxy where humanity teeters on the edge of extinction. The Marines Malevolent kill the Emperor's enemies with ruthless efficiency. That they also kill plenty of the Emperor's subjects is regrettable, but in the Imperium's grim calculus, acceptable. Across the Imperium, the name Marines Malevolent provokes visceral reactions. Imperial Guard commanders who fought alongside them speak in hushed, bitter tones about brothers sacrificed for tactical advantage. Administratum officials who've coordinated with them describe arrogance bordering on madness. Civilian survivors of their campaigns, when they exist at all, tell stories of Space Marines who fought like demons and showed less mercy than Orks. Other chapters maintain careful distance. The Salamanders have gone from disapproval to active enmity after the incidents on Armageddon and Scoria. The Black Templars remember Ballack's dishonor and Tiamed's humiliation. The Star Phantoms nearly destroyed them during the Macharian Heresy. Even chapters that should theoretically share their pragmatic approach find the Marines Malevolent, total abandonment of brotherhood, deeply disturbing. The Inquisition watches them with particular interest. Multiple investigations have circled the chapter looking for evidence of corruption, heresy, or chaos taint. They've found nothing. The Marines Malevolent aren't corrupted. They're not secretly serving the Dark Gods. They're simply exactly what they appear to be. Loyalist Space Marines who've taken the Imperium's brutal pragmatism to its logical extreme. This might be the most disturbing thing about them. Chaos corruption would be understandable. Gene seed degradation would be excusable. But the Marines Malevolent are just loyal servants of the Emperor who've concluded that mercy is weakness, honor is inefficiency, and civilian lives are tactical resources to be expended as needed. They haven't fallen from grace. They never believed in grace at all. Their war record remains exemplary by the only metric they care about: victory. They fought in dozens of major campaigns. They defeated countless enemies. They've held lines that should have broken and taken objectives that should have been impossible. That thousands die in the process of each victory bothers them not at all. The arrival of Primaris Space Marines and Belisarius Call's new technology presents interesting questions about the chapter's future. Have they received Primaris reinforcements? Have they gained access to updated equipment? Or has their reputation become so toxic that even Mars' bounty bypasses them? The incident in Loki 2, where they recovered Primaris gene tech from the Custodians, suggests they're at least aware of the new technology. Whether they've been authorized to use it remains unclear. In the end, the Marines Malevolent are what they've always been, the Imperium's reflection without the flattering filter. They strip away the noble rhetoric and reveal the ugly calculations beneath. Every Space Marine chapter makes tactical decisions that cost lives. The Marines Malevolent simply don't pretend to feel bad about it. Every Imperial commander weighs civilian casualties against military objectives. The Marines Malevolent just do the math faster and care less about the numbers. They remind us that the Imperium is not a noble endeavor. It's a survival mechanism, a meat grinder that's been running for 10,000 years, consuming lives to sustain itself. The Emperor, if he could speak, might look upon the Marines Malevolent and see exactly what he created the Adeptus Astartes to be. Perfect weapons utterly committed to humanity's survival, unburdened by sentiment or mercy. Or perhaps he would be horrified. Perhaps the Emperor envisioned his Space Marines as noble warrior kings who would unite and protect humanity. Perhaps the Marines Malevolent represent a corruption of that dream, showing what happens when you create super soldiers without ensuring they retain their humanity. We'll never know. The Emperor is silent, and the Marines Malevolent keep fighting. They operate from their fleet, their strike cruiser Purgatory carrying them from war to war. They wear their sunburst yellow and black with pride, the warning colors marking them as dangerous even to their own kind. They maintain their equipment through salvage and force, lacking the support other chapters take for granted. They fight with outdated war gear and ancient armor held together by hate and determination. And they win. Time after time, mission after mission, they achieve their objectives. The cost is measured in blood, in screams and burning cities. But the Marines Malevolent measures only success. They are the Imperium's monsters, deployed when the situation is so desperate that victory justifies any atrocity. Captain Vinyar's interrupted broadcast on Armageddon echoes across the centuries. These words define the Marines Malevolent. They believe them utterly. They live them every day. And somewhere in the Imperium's vast bureaucracy, officials read reports of their latest atrocities, shake their heads, and file the complaints away. Because for all their brutality, for all their dishonor, for all the blood on their hands, the Marines Malevolent remain loyal. They kill the Emperor's enemies, and in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, that's ultimately all that matters. The sunburst yellow and black will continue to strike fear into friend and foe alike. The thunderbolt and the wing will mark their passage with ash and screams. The Marines Malevolent will keep fighting, hating, winning. They are what the Imperium needs them to be, even if no one wants to admit it. They are the weapon without mercy, the victory without honor, the salvation without redemption. They are the Marines Malevolent, and they will never apologize.